Hey plant lovers, welcome back. Here's a number that surprised me when I researched it. The ZZ plant you can buy at almost any Home Depot in America today wasn't even available in the United States until the late 1990s. Dutch nurseries figured out how to mass propagate it, shipped the first batches over, and within a few years, it became one of the best-selling houseplants in the country. So this plant, that feels like it's always been around, the one sitting in every office lobby and dentist's waiting room, is actually a relative newcomer. And almost nobody who owns one understands what it really is, or where it comes from. That gap is exactly why so many of them die. Because here's the thing, the ZZ plant has a reputation for being unkillable, and that reputation is mostly earned. But hard to kill and thriving are two very different states. Most ZZ plants in American homes are surviving, not thriving. They're hanging on. And the difference between a ZZ that's merely alive and one that's putting out thick, glossy, dark new growth comes down to 7 specific things, most of which run opposite to how you'd care for a normal houseplant. So today I want to walk you through the 7 care tips that actually matter, and more importantly, the biology underneath each one. Because once you understand why this plant behaves the way it does, you stop guessing and you start getting it right every time. Stick with me to the end, because the last 2 tips are the ones that separate a ZZ that survives from a ZZ that genuinely flourishes. Let's start before you even own the plant at the garden center. Here's what most people don't know. The single biggest factor in whether your ZZ thrives isn't your watering or your light. It's the plant you pick up off the shelf in the first place. A stressed or rotting ZZ at purchase will fight you for months. A healthy one almost takes care of itself. So learn to inspect before you buy. When you're standing in front of a shelf of them, the first thing to do is look at the leaves. You want vibrant, glossy leaflets that feel firm and slightly waxy when you press one gently between 2 fingers. That waxy firmness tells you the plant is well hydrated and the internal water system is working. What you're avoiding is anything yellow, limp, or wrinkled. Wrinkled leaflets are a quiet signal most shoppers miss. They usually mean the plant has been sitting bone dry so long it's pulling on its own reserves. Yellow or mushy means the opposite problem. Too much water, and that's the one that can hide real damage. Now look at the stems, the upright stalks the leaflets grow on. They should stand firm and erect. If they're soft, bending, or drooping at the base, put that plant down and walk away. Soft stems near the soil line are the first visible sign of rot creeping up from below. And here's a counterintuitive one. Shorter stems with thick, closely spaced leaves are actually a better buy than tall, leggy ones. Short and dense means the plant was grown in good light. Tall and stretched means it was grown in a dark corner of the nursery. Reaching for light, it never got. Then check the undersides of the leaves for pests you're looking for: sticky residue, fine webbing, white cottony specks, or tiny holes. Pests at the store don't stay at the store. They ride home with you and spread to every other plant you own. So this 30-second check protects your whole collection, not just this one purchase. And finally, if you can, feel the soil and tip the pot to peek at the roots near the surface. The soil should be slightly dry, never soggy, and here's an insider note. Garden centers are notorious for overwatering ZZ plants on a blanket schedule meant for thirstier stock. So damp, compacted soil on the shelf is a genuine warning sign, not just a neutral observation. Healthy roots are pale and firm. Brown and mushy is a hard no. If you spot whitish, knobby rhizomes poking up at the soil surface, by the way, that's a good sign. It means a mature, well-established plant. That 5-minute inspection at the store will save you more heartache than any care tip I can give you afterward. And speaking of which, if a video like this is the kind of thing you want more of, the deep why behind plant care instead of the same recycled tips, go ahead and subscribe now so the next one finds you. It genuinely helps the channel reach more plant people. Okay, you've picked a healthy one, you've got it home. Tip number 2 is light. And this is where the ZZ's reputation does it a real disservice. You've heard 1,000 times that the ZZ plant thrives in low light. That sentence has probably killed more of these plants than overwatering. Here's the precise truth. The ZZ tolerates low light. It does not thrive in it. There's a world of difference between those 2 words, and the plant lives in that difference. What it actually wants is bright, indirect light. the kind you get a few feet back from an east or south-facing window, where the room is bright, but no harsh midday sun is hitting the leaves directly. Give it that, and you get fast growth, thick stems, and that deep glossy color. Put it in a dim hallway instead, and it won't die, but it will grow slowly. The stems will stretch out thin and leggy, reaching for the window, and the new leaves will come in smaller and spaced further apart. The plant is essentially rationing itself. It survives on the energy budget you've given it, but it can't build. There's a reason it tolerates shade as gracefully as it does, and it ties back to that African canopy. In the wild, it grows on the forest floor under dappled, broken light. Never full sun, never total dark. That's why direct, harsh midday sun through glass is actually a mistake in the other direction. It can scorch the leaves and bleach that rich green to a sickly pale yellow. So you're aiming for a specific middle zone, bright enough that the room feels genuinely lit, but never a spot where a hard beam of sun lands directly on the foliage for hours. One simple trick. If the light coming through your window is strong enough to cast a sharp, crisp shadow on the wall at midday, pull the plant back a few feet or filter it through a sheer curtain. A soft, fuzzy-edged shadow is just about perfect. If your home doesn't have a great bright spot, and plenty don't, especially through northern winter, a basic LED grow light from Lowe's or Amazon fixes the problem completely. I want to share something that genuinely changed my results. A ZZ under a grow light through the dark months keeps growing right through winter, while one relying on a weak window just stalls out and waits for spring. One small lamp is the whole difference. And if you've got the Raven cultivar, the one with the dramatic near-black foliage light, matters even more. Because that black color only develops fully as each new stem matures, and it develops far better in good light than in shade. New Raven growth actually emerges bright lime green and darkens to near black over several weeks as it hardens off. In poor light, that final deep color never fully arrives. One quick word on temperature and humidity before we move on, because people overthink it. The ZZ wants exactly the conditions most homes already have. Comfortable room temperatures, ordinary household humidity, nothing special. What it can't handle is extremes and sudden swings. Keep it away from cold drafts, frosty winter windows, and the blasting air of a heating or AC vent. It has no frost tolerance at all, so if you summer it outdoors, bring it back inside well before the first cold night. Consistency is the whole game. This is not a plant you need to mist or fuss over. That brings us to tip 3, and this is the big one: watering. This is where almost every ZZ death happens, and to do it right, you have to understand what's going on underground. When you look at a ZZ plant, you're only seeing half of it. Below the soil, this plant grows from thick, potato-like structures called rhizomes, underground stems, swollen and fleshy, that store water and nutrients. That's the secret to the whole plant. Those rhizomes are why it can survive your 2-week vacation, your forgetfulness, your neglect. The plant is carrying its own water tank everywhere it goes. And that tank exists because of where this plant comes from. The ZZ is native to the seasonally dry forests and grasslands of eastern Africa. Its range runs across Tanzania, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. Picture that landscape for a second. It's not a lush rainforest. It's a place that gets long stretches of hard drought, broken by short, violent bursts of seasonal rain, growing in poor soils that swing from soaked to bone dry and back again. The plant had to solve a brutal problem. How do you survive months with no water, in thin soil, under a patchy canopy? Its answer was the rhizome. So, the plant evolved a strategy: gorge on water the moment it rains, pack it underground in those swollen rhizomes, then live off the stored reserve through the long dry season. Think about what that means for the plant sitting in your living room. This is not a species built to expect constant moisture. It's a species built to expect drought, the way a camel is built for a desert crossing. When you water it every few days like a fern, you're not being generous. You're handing it the one condition its entire body spent millions of years learning to avoid. The soil never dries. The rhizomes can't offload the water they're holding, and they start to rot from the inside. The kindest thing you can do for this plant is to leave it alone far longer than feels comfortable. Here's where it gets fascinating, and this is a detail most care guides completely miss. The ZZ plant doesn't just store water, it actually changes how it breathes to conserve it. Most houseplants open the tiny pores on their leaves during the day to take in carbon dioxide and lose water in the process. But researchers studying Zamioculcas zamiofolia found it can switch to something called CAM photosynthesis, short for crassylation acid metabolism, the same water-saving trick cacti and succulents use. In plain terms, the plant opens its pores at night instead of during the hot day, takes in its carbon dioxide then, and seals up tight when the sun is out. One published study found that under drought stress, this nighttime pathway can supply up to 19% of the plant's daily carbon gain. It's a true survival machine. The plant is engineered, top to bottom, around the assumption that water is scarce. So what does that mean for you, standing there with a watering can? It means you wait. You let the soil dry out completely, and I mean completely, all the way to the bottom of the pot before you water again. In an average indoor home, that usually lands somewhere around once every 3 to 4 weeks, and even longer in winter. But don't water on a calendar. Water on the soil. Push a wooden chopstick or a moisture meter all the way down. If it comes out with any damp soil clinging to it, wait. Only when it's dry top to bottom do you water. And when you do water, water thoroughly. Run it through until it drains from the bottom. Let the whole root ball soak. Then empty the saucer, so the pot is never sitting in standing water. Deep and rare beats, shallow and frequent every single time. If you ever find yourself unsure whether to water, wait another week. Underwatering a ZZ is almost impossible to do real harm with. Overwatering is the thing that kills it. How do you know if you've gone too far the wrong way? Wrinkled, softening stems and leaves that pucker slightly mean the rhizomes are running low, and you've genuinely underwatered rare. But it happens. Yellowing lower leaves and mushy stems at the base mean the opposite. Too much water and rot is setting in. Learn to read those two signals and you'll never be guessing. Tip 4 is feeding, and the headline here is, less than you think. The ZZ is a slow grower with low nutrient demands. And that's not laziness, it's the same drought survival logic at work. A plant that evolved in poor African soils, growing slowly to conserve resources, simply doesn't have the metabolism to use a heavy feed. Over-fertilizing does real damage. It builds up mineral salts in the soil faster than the slow-moving roots can take them in, and those salts draw moisture back out of the root tissue and chemically burn it. You'll see it as brown, crispy leaf tips. My approach is a balanced, general-purpose houseplant fertilizer diluted to about half strength, given roughly once a month during spring and summer when the plant is actively growing, then backed off or stopped entirely through fall and winter when growth slows. If you live somewhere with real winters, just skip feeding in the cold months altogether. The plant isn't using it, so it only accumulates as salt waiting to do harm. And here's a small habit that protects the plant long-term. Every few waterings, flush the soil. Take the pot to the sink, shower, or outside with a hose, and run water through it thoroughly until it pours out the drainage holes for a good while. This leaches out the built-up fertilizer salts and the minerals from tap water before they can harm the roots. 5 minutes, a few times a season, and you've prevented one of the most common slow killers of houseplants. Tip 5. Soil and repotting flows straight out of everything we just said about those rhizomes. Because the plant stores so much water internally and hates sitting wet, your soil has one job above all others: drain fast. A heavy, dense potting mix that holds water is the enemy. The simplest solution is a pre-made cactus or succulent mix, straight off the shelf. If you want to mix your own, combine regular potting soil with chunky material, pine bark, perlite, a little coarse sand so water races through and air can reach the roots. Aeroids like this plant want oxygen around their roots, not a swamp. Always use a pot with drainage holes non-negotiable, and when you repot, only go up one size. This trips up a lot of well-meaning plant owners. A pot that's too big holds a huge volume of soil that stays wet long after the roots have taken what they need, and that lingering moisture is exactly what rots the rhizomes. Here's the part nobody talks about. ZZ plants actually like being a little snug in their pot, and they only need repotting every 2 to 3 years. Wait until the plant is genuinely root-bound. Sometimes, you'll literally see the rhizomes pressing against or even warping a plastic pot before you size up. And do me a favor. Wear gloves when you repot. That brings me to something important that the Easy Care label tends to gloss over. The ZZ plant is mildly toxic. Every part of it, leaves, stems, those rhizomes, contains microscopic needle-shaped crystals of calcium oxalate. They're called raphides, and the mechanism is almost mechanical. When the tissue is chewed or crushed, those tiny needles physically pierce soft tissue and release an irritant, which is why a curious pet or child who bites a leaf gets immediate mouth pain, drooling, and swelling. It's rarely dangerous. The pain stops most kids and animals before they swallow much. But the University of Connecticut's Extension Office flat out recommends keeping this plant out of reach of small children and pets entirely. It's the same compound found in pothos, philodendron, and peace lily. So if you know those, you know this. Just handle the cut rhizomes with gloves, wash your hands after, and site the plant somewhere the cat can't make it a snack. And here's a piece of this plant's story I found genuinely moving while researching. In its native Tanzania, the Sukuma people don't treat this as a decoration at all. They use the roots medicinally, applying them topically to treat ulcers. Western researchers who later studied the plant's chemistry isolated real bioactive compounds in it, including antibacterial ones. So the same crystals that make it mildly irritating to chew are part of a defensive chemistry that a culture halfway around the world learned to turn into medicine. The plant on your shelf has a far deeper history than the price tag at the garden center suggests. Tip 6 is the easiest one to forget, and it's grooming, though it does double duty. Because ZZ leaves are so glossy and the plant sits still for so long, they're dust magnets. And that dust isn't just cosmetic. A film of dust on a leaf physically blocks light from reaching the cells that photosynthesize. So a dusty ZZ is literally feeding itself less. Every few weeks, wipe the leaves down with a damp microfiber cloth. It restores that signature shine and, more importantly, lets the plant actually use the light you've given it. As for pruning, you barely need to. Unlike a pothos or a rubber plant that needs trimming to stay full, the ZZ fills out on its own as fresh stems push up from the rhizomes below. Your only real pruning job is snipping off the occasional yellowed or dead leaf with clean, sharp scissors to keep it tidy. Which brings us to tip 7, pests, and the long game. And honestly, the headline is good news. ZZ plants are among the most pest-resistant houseplants you can own. That thick, waxy cuticle on the leaves makes them a hard target. Most soft-bodied insects simply can't get a foothold on that slick, armored surface. I've had mealybug outbreaks tear through other plants in the same room and never touch the ZZ sitting right beside them. But resistant isn't immune. Now and then you'll spot mealybugs, those small white cottony clusters, usually tucked where the leaflets meet the stem. In the protected crevices, the bugs prefer. Occasionally, you'll see spider mites in very dry indoor air, giving the leaves a faint, stippled, dusty look with fine webbing underneath. If you do find either, treat the plant thoroughly with an insecticidal soap, spraying every surface, including the undersides, then rinsing it off and follow up with a systemic insecticide worked into the soil for stubborn cases. The key is persistence. These pests lay eggs and hide in spots a single spray misses, so retreat every week or two until they're truly gone. Don't expect one application to finish the job. Staying on it is what wins. It helps to know that most ZZ pest problems are actually downstream of stress. A plant in good light, watered correctly, with clean leaves, is a plant whose defenses are fully up. A weakened, overwatered, dust-covered ZZ in a dark corner is the one that gets picked off. So, in a real sense, the first 6 tips are your best pest control. A healthy ZZ rarely invites trouble in the first place. And that's the whole picture. Pick a healthy plant. Give it brighter light than you've been told. Water it deeply, but rarely. Feed it sparingly. Pot it lean and snug. Keep its leaves clean, and stay watchful for the occasional pest. Do those 7 things, and you don't just keep a ZZ alive. You get the thick, glossy, architectural plant that made everyone fall in love with this species in the first place. Here's what strikes me most, after all of it. Nearly every rule that keeps this plant thriving is really one rule: wearing different clothes. Respect where it came from. The drought it evolved in. The poor, fast-draining African soil. The bright dappled light under an open canopy. Get those right, and the rhizomes do the rest. The plant has been surviving on its own for far longer than it's been sitting in our living rooms. Our job isn't to baby it, it's to stop getting in its way. If this helped you understand your ZZ a little better, do me one favor and leave a comment telling me which tip surprised you the most. I read them, and they shape what I research next. And if you want the follow-up, my next video walks through 5 different ways to propagate this plant, so you can turn one into a whole collection, completely free. Take care of your plants.